Hello there. Today I'm going to try to answer a question that I get from time to time, and that is what to do when the market isn't ready. What do you do when you're just ahead of your time? And I know, I've been there. I've been doing things. I've been a pioneer in a space, the live action role play space, where we were simply ahead of our time. We were simply ahead of the market by a long while. More on that later. But what do you do if you're in this position? Well, I'm going to give you 5 truths, and I'm going to give you 5 tips to keep it simple. The first truth is from Bill Gross. And Bill Gross, apart from having a name that he might probably sometimes have been teased with a little bit, I'm guessing, Bill Gross in 2015 delivered an amazing TED Talk. In that TED Talk, he talked about why do companies succeed and why do they fail. One of the things he found out was that timing, it wasn't everything, but it was super important. You look at the slide here from his TED Talk, talks about funding, business model, the idea, team, and execution, but at the top of it is timing. Are you in the right place at the right time? The second is there are some things that the world simply isn't ready for because of technology. Video is a great example. This is a graph of TVs in American households from 1900 to 2000. Now, as you can see, there's a pretty big kind of a growth spurt from 1950 and onwards to about 1970, 1980. So video came about in the late 70s. Now, video might have happened on stage in the 60s when TVs were still kind of exploding into American households and in the rest of the world as well, but not at the same speed. But it would have been hard-pressed to see video in the 1930s because what were you going to do? Show your home video on a TV you didn't have yet? The thing is, there are often technological barriers that we are pushing against. And sometimes, before one thing is adopted, the thing you're supplying, which kind of uses that or presupposes that, well, it's not ready yet. And video, for video to get really adopted and to explode onto the stage, well, not only did TVs have to exist, people had to have them in certain numbers, they also needed to be familiar with them. There needed to be a whole ecosystem before the VCR came along and some of the other systems really caught on. Truth number 3, De Beers. That's not a truth. De Beers is very famous for being one of the companies that we always talk about when we talk about marketing and stories, about a diamond is forever, about how a company can shape market demand. The truth is, you can do it. It's just very, very, very hard. So yes, there are companies like De Beers out there who say, we have a product. Let's find somebody to sell it to. Let's create that demand through clever marketing, storytelling, and a little bit of genius. Not everyone is De Beers. So if your plan is to say we're ahead of the market, but we can just do a De Beers on them, maybe you should look for a plan B as well. Number 4, Santa Claus. And why is Santa Claus a truth? It would be easy to argue that Santa Claus is more made up than true, especially when you look at him like this. This is Santa Claus. We know this. He's red, he's white. He's part of Coca-Cola commercials and has been for a long while. Was it always like this? Nope. No, no, no. Christmas Eve and the red and white guy have not always been associated with each other. Coca-Cola cleverly co-opted an already existing tradition, and they made it their own, and they made Santa Claus their guy. Again, you can do it, but it's not easy. But it is possible to take something that's out there, and maybe you feel, is this about being ahead of your time? Well, if you create a thing and then you tie your idea to it, then it's definitely not ahead of its time. Then it's just in the right time. It's hard. So, Coca-Cola, like De Beers, a strategy, co-opting something that's already there, but maybe not the only strategy you should look at. Number 5, this is one of the things I love. Fresh fruit. I like fresh fruit. Also, fresh fruit, apparently, if you do a little bit of research on it, you'll find that fresh fruit was something that some sailors, I think there was some English captain or so, found out in the 18th century. Oh, fresh fruit is good because then the crew will have less scurvy. Then they'll become less sick, so we should bring fresh fruit. Now, why didn't somebody find out in the 17th century or in the 16th century? If you go back far enough, there wasn't the need for it because sea voyages weren't that long because the boats couldn't take it. But if you were with Magellan and you sailed across from one end of the world to the other, you sailed kind of around the world, literally, then maybe knowing this might be nice because you would have found out at some point It could easily have been discovered in the 17th instead. There's no factor that was in the way for it, except it just didn't happen. Now, that was 5 truths, not necessarily nice ones. So I'm also going to give you 5 tips. Number 1, you can change your aim. Famous case in point, Apple wanted to hit the spreadsheet market with their personal computers because that was what the personal computer market was then. Instead, they found out that their machines were more beloved by graphic designers and creatives and that sort of thing. And then they changed. And at some point, Apple began to be like the creative computer, or something like an IBM or other brands of the PC nature, were more a piece of like a work, a numbers workhorse is what I'm trying to get at. Someplace where you put your spreadsheets and your Word documents and that sort of thing. But Apple, that was for the creatives. So Apple said, okay, we're now selling to creatives. And they've managed to leverage that brand and still have it that they are a company for creatives. They're for people who like to challenge things and make dreams come alive, all that sort of stuff. They didn't start out that way, but they became that. Number 2, you can articulate why it is that people should get what you do, whether they should buy it or they should use it or they should support it. You can make it very clear. Now, this is a pretty unremarkable statement to put on a blackboard. Use me well and keep me clean. I'll never tell what I've seen. It's a nice little micro poem. However, in this day and age, that sort of thing is actually pretty valuable. We all leave digital trails. Everything we say and do stays on the internet forever. That's kind of the joke. But something like a blackboard, Snapchat built a whole business model on taking this truth, or this tip, if we want to look at it that way, because I'm in the tip section now, and leveraging that and making that into part of their product. They said, no, we're doing something that disappears. Whether it really does, that's a debate for another time. But the idea behind it was to say, okay, here's a killer reason why you should use our software instead of somebody else's, because it disappears in a time where nothing does. So you can make it very clear why it is people should use what it is you're doing. And a lot of companies and organizations are terrible at this. They're terrible at storytelling. They're terrible at making it clear why it is they're special. They're terrible at saying, what do you actually need it for? What need does it solve? What job does it do, if we want to dive into Clayton Christensen territory for a moment? Number 3, you can adapt. This is Lego. Not only did Lego start as wooden toys and became the famous plastic Lego later, but Lego is also something where you have a bit of Lego, like the ones on screen, and then you say, oh, if it doesn't work in one fashion, we can build it in another. Change your product, change your service, change your offering, change your idea. If you're trying to do something and it doesn't catch on, well, you can try changing it. Maybe removing a feature or two, maybe adding some, maybe giving it to them in black, maybe translating it into Arabic. There are many things you can do to adapt what it is you're doing and thereby having a second chance. Number 4, and this is one of the crucial ones, and I wish I had been better at this myself. I really wish. This is Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, Disney's new Star Wars theme park. They're also doing a Star Wars hotel. Now, what is different with this compared to their other stuff, to Disneyland and that sort of thing, is that here it's immersive. It's you are part of the story. You go there and you not just walk around in a theme park, but you enter the Star Wars universe. At least that's the idea. Part of that idea, I don't know how big a part. Maybe it's a tiny part. Maybe it's a rather big part. I don't know. But part of that idea has gotten some inspiration from the live-action role-play scene, especially the Nordic one, where I have my background. And we've had study trips from Disney Imagineers to our events, and we gladly shared with them ideas. And me, personally, I'm happy if just a little bit of our thinking ended up in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, and I'm even happier if some of it ends up in the new upcoming hotel. Why? Because we've been doing something for years and years, and it was lovely and fantastic and amazing and life-changing, but nobody knew about it. Nobody cared. But when Disney did it, when Disney does something, even if it's a lighter version, even if it's more mass market and less kind of indie artsy, it has an impact. It makes a difference. People celebrate it. So personally, I love the fact that I can point at something that Disney does and say, that was a little bit inspired by something that I've been part of doing. Maybe not a lot, but a little bit counts as well. And when it comes to being ahead of your time. I wish we'd been better. I wish we'd allied with Disney or with something like that. I wish we'd been better at figuring out how to take what we had, which was and still is brilliant and amazing, and find people who could help kind of bring it to a broader audience, bring it to people where it mattered on a bigger scale. So if you have that, if you're that pioneer and nobody's listening, find somebody who has reach. Get in the door, have that conversation, sacrifice some of your equity, make a partnership, be the underdog, but ally with one of the big guys or one of the established if you can't get your thing working. At least it's an option. And I wish I'd been better at doing that some years back. Now, of course, we've had Star Wars, so we're also going to have Star Trek. We're going to have the Borg, and we're going to have assimilation. Because if you are one of these bigger players, well then, and you're trying to do something that's ahead of its time, then maybe gobbling up one of those smaller players who knows how to do it. Because then you don't have to worry about the how. You just have to worry about the how to get it out there and how to sell it and how to market it and how to distribute it. But you don't have to worry about how to actually do it, because there will be people out there. If you're one of the big guys, if you're one of the established players, there will be people out there who have ideas and who have things that they've been doing for years that you've never come across. Whether you're in banking, if you're Deutsche Bank, or you're Disney, or you are something like Facebook. There are companies and organizations out there that are on the cutting edge of innovation. And if you are a little bit too, well, let's say you're trying to do something new and you don't quite have the kind of experience with it, but you know how to get it out there, then find one of these little players and gobble them up. Make them ally themselves with you, or just assimilate them outright. Either way, both tactics work depending on your size. And finally, I know this is a little bit controversial, but sometimes you just have to accept that it's not ready. The world isn't there. It's not now. The time is not now. You are on Bill Gross's slide with the 42% that had the right timing. You're not one of them. And sometimes you just need to accept that, even if it's hard. Even if you need to go back and say, oh, I hate it, and cry a bit into your pillow or hit it or whatever you do to cope. Sometimes you just have to accept it is not time. Doesn't mean it's not time in 5 years. Doesn't mean it's not time in 5 months. But it's not always the time. Sometimes the world simply is not ready. And this, where we started from, I'm not sure the world will ever be ready for this. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't a hell of a lot of fun to do. And I'm glad we did it. Thank you for listening.